Welcome back. We are going to continue with our course. This time we're going to turn our art into something like this. We're going to do some more detail passes and talk about lighting and shading. So at the end of the last session, we made this. Our next step is to add in some gradients, which will allow us to give kind of a sheen effect to things, or add in the similar effect, but paint it ourselves using our brushes. First, let's go over the painterly look. So after we set up all of our different blockouts with our base colors, what we can do for each of these is we can use our shape here as a mask so that anything we draw is going to be limited to it. For example, I'm going to make sure we're in pixel mode and select my brush tool. Come over to brushes. I like to use the watercolors. These are included by default with Affinity. I particularly like this brush down here, Watercolor Bristle 1, and this works best with a drawing tablet. So using this method, you will want a drawing tablet so that you can have pressure sensitivity, which is the harder I press down on my pen, the more pigment is put onto the canvas. If I draw anything, so for instance, I've got this yellow color. If I draw, you can see no matter where I paint, it will only show up within that curve or within that shape. The particularly nice thing about watercolors is as you paint over the same area, they multiply together and have a layered effect. Since all watercolor is based on transparency, or in physical medium, it's how much water is on the page. So I want to get kind of a sheen effect, so I'm gonna make sure I have a dark gray color, and I'm gonna paint it along this axe. And if I just do it lightly, it won't color as solidly. I'm gonna go with a little bit of a lighter color, just loosely get it around this dark edge here. Do note, sometimes you can get errors if you are using the pixel tool. So if you press B for brush, sometimes you'll have to hit it again to make sure you're on the brush tool. This process will take some amount of experimentation. I'm going to look for a different brush, a fainter one, because that one was doing too much. Okay, that one looks a little bit better. So we're going to put a little bit of that in there, and then we're going to switch back to our other brush. We're right near the edge. And then I'm going to want to do something about my notch right here. So I'm going to want to brighten that up. So I'm going to switch to my eraser and erase some of the texture right next to it. So that way it sticks out a little bit more. Makes it look like it's fresher, like newer metal got exposed there, which is exactly what I want. And then you can move on and do this for all the other parts. You can use the eyedropper tool to select a color and then go either lighter or darker to kind of change the different shade of it. So if I want to go lighter, I can use that to do what's called highlights. So I can make it look lighter along this part of the axe if I wanted to. Or I could go darker to do more shadows and kind of make there be more of a shadow down here. It's up to you what kind of thing you want to go for. I'm going to put a little bit of shadow over here. Maybe a little bit of variance along the blade itself. You want to zoom out when you're doing this kind of stuff to see like what it would look like when it's smaller, because in your game it's going to be a fairly small object. This isn't something that people are going to be zoomed in looking very closely on. They'll be more zoomed out. For wood, you want to paint shadows in such that it looks cylindrical. So I'm going to want to start off with this type of color, being the same color of my handle. I'm going to go much darker than that. I'm going to choose one edge that I want to paint darker than the rest. So I'm going to just start adding in a little bit of darkness along this edge. Most of these are going to be fairly subtle effects. You don't need to do anything crazy complex for this, but you will notice that it will add quite a bit. Then the last bit for this is the handle. I'm going to use kind of like a bright color, make sure I'm on a brush that I like. And this handle is part of this object, so I'm going to navigate to the pixel layer since I already layered some on. I'm just going to add it to where these ropes are. And then I can change my eraser brush. So when you press E to pull up the eraser, you can change the type of brush you're using. I'm going to erase that little bit over the line there. Zoom out. All right, I like the way that looks. Could maybe put some lighter bit around here or change that circle a little bit. Notice it doesn't quite line up, but overall, I like that. All right, on to the next style. So this style is not going to be using the brush at all. This is something I recommend if you just have access to a mouse. So we're going to be using gradients. Your gradient tool, the shortcut is G, or it's this paint looking wheel one. It says fill tool, but it's commonly used for gradients. So if I click and drag, we're going to get this slider here. We have options up here between linear, elliptical, radial, so on and so forth. I like to use linear for this. If you click on this, you'll see it's the same line here. And you can click on either of these nodes or click in the middle to add new nodes if you wish. And then check the color and change the color of things. So what I like to do for metal is I like to catch a thin ray of light on one edge. So I'm gonna make it a little bit go from light darker to darker again. It might take a little bit of tweaking. So I just want the top darker to just be subtly darker. This midline right here will change how sharp the line is. So if I have it more like this, it's gonna extend further down. Over here, it's gonna extend further up. It's the blending between the two colors. Do be careful though that if you just click, you can mess up your highlight. After you have that to something that you like, now you can just move on to your other pieces and do the same thing. So I'm gonna hit G. This one I'm gonna want to be mostly darker, but just have a little bit of light over at the end. So it looks like it's got a spiky, like this comes to a point over here. I do notice that I need to change the order of those two because my bandages looked out of line. For these, I want these to appear kind of tannish. And it will do a good job of guessing colors for you, but sometimes you don't like those colors. So you can tweak those if you want. If you're going for something more realistic, you're gonna want all your light parts of objects to be coming from the same area. That way it'll look like the light's coming from one direction. However, I find that for a simplistic art style like this, it looks a little bit better to just kind of wing it and not make it super consistent, just make it make sense for the piece. You can change the rotation of the angle by rotating one end. And there you go, that's the second approach that I will sometimes use. Particularly, it works very good on shiny metal bits, like that axe edge looks very good. And the last method is a combination of the both. So what we can do is we can go into here, we can hit G, apply a slight gradient, go to our rock, apply a slight gradient. This gradient is just going to be towards the tip though. You can drag the center line to change the strength. I just want it faintly there. Do the same thing to these straps. And then we're going to go in afterwards and paint in our own highlights and shadows. After you have that, then we're going to choose our specific points and muddy it up a bit. Again, I like to use the watercolors for this, so I'm going to switch. If you do want some access to some more textures, the Frankentoon texturizer pack is quite good. I'll link that one down below. So this looks very light. I'm gonna mess with the opacity on this layer, so it's not quite gonna do quite as much. I just want to lighten it up a little bit. This axe is supposed to be made out of rock, so I'm not gonna make it quite as smooth as the metal one. So it's a little bit more bumpy. There's a little bit more wear and tear on it. You can use your smudge tool to blend colors together if you need to. So this is going to blend that tan in the background a little bit, and that will give it kind of a worn look to it. Then we need to add an effect to the wood as well. Just like before, I'm going to turn my opacity down a bit, switch to a darker color, add a little bit more. If you want to, you can click the pixel layer and have multiple pixel layers clip. And there we go. Now we have 3 finished axes for our game. Hope you found this interesting. Please comment below if you have any questions, hit the like and subscribe buttons, and I will see you in the next one.